Welcome back to the channel. I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, and in today's video, Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers are reportedly not even close on a contract extension to keep the star quarterback in Green Bay. Are they going to deal with a Dak Prescott-like situation? Let's figure out what the article says and come to our own conclusions. Please remember to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. In an article written by Cody Benjamin of CBSSports.com, Jordan Love, Packers not close to new contract ahead of 2024 training camp despite mutual interest per report. The article begins, the Green Bay Packers have been eyeing a new contract for quarterback Jordan Love for a while now, with GM Brian Gutekunst hoping to strike a long-term extension ahead of training camp. A day before veterans are due to camp, however, the two sides aren't close to a deal, according to ESPN. The vibes right now are positive, Jeremy Fowler reported on negotiations between Love's camp and the team, but there hasn't been a lot of production as far as getting close to a deal. It's going to take a little time. When camp begins, their negotiators and their officials are all together, and they're going to try to get a plan together. So, Jordan Love is entering the final year of his deal. If you remember, they extended him 1 year this past season, kind of the make it or break it extension, just to give him a chance, really, now that Rodgers is gone. The first half of the season, things did not go very well for him, but he looked like a star in the second half of the season and into the playoffs as well. They have a great coach in Matt LaFleur and a Shanahan-style scheme, so it's really conducive to fantasy success and basically the entire offense, but especially for the quarterback involved. Think Brock Purdy in San Francisco, for instance, and even Tua Tagovailoa in Miami, although Mike McDaniel has his own iterations on the system, but it really is the meta across the league now. And when we think about quarterback contracts in the NFL, they are ever growing and rapidly. Joe Burrow got extended, Trevor Lawrence, these are the highest paid quarterbacks now. You would think it would be Mahomes, Josh Allen, but their contracts are actually much lower than the highest paid now. So with Jordan Love having this second half of the year in which he did this past year, we really should be expecting a massive contract extension in the works. The article continues, the Packers know the market for Love, Fowler added, suggesting $50 million per year is the likely floor for a long-term contract after both Jared Goff and Trevor Lawrence cleared that number with their own extensions this offseason. And after a messy final few seasons managing Aaron Rodgers under center, per Fowler, Gutekunst is determined to secure Love for the long term with a cleaner resolution at the negotiating table. We're in those conversations right now, Gutekunst told 97.3 The Game in June when asked about Love's contract status. Both parties want the same thing. Both parties want a contract extension done. That stability at the position really allows you to have some security with the way we build our team. So, we're looking forward to getting that done, but it never goes fast. It continues, there is no indication Love intends to hold out from camp while seeking a new deal. The former first-round pick is technically signed through 2024 after signing a 1-year extension this past offseason. So, obviously, we haven't heard any reports of Love wanting to hold out. He's not making a big, grand deal out of this, kind of like Aaron Rodgers did in the past, but he seems to be just about business and wanting to win and get better, which is really good for the Packers. Really, quarterback is the most important position in football. If you are not set at quarterback, good luck winning Super Bowls. And with the Packers having a history of success, and with Favre to Rodgers to now probably Jordan Love, they have had a very successful, and we'll see about Jordan Love, but Hall of Fame level quarterback play for decades now. They really don't want to mess this up. It's hard enough finding one quarterback that can be the building block for your entire team, let alone 3 in a row. They would be absolute fools to let this slip through their hands. In my opinion, they just need to fork over the money because it's only going to get worse as contracts get more and more bloated. So Jordan Love is 25.7 years old, over 6'3", right around 220 pounds, going into his 4th season. Remember, he was a first-round pick in 2021, back when they still had Aaron Rodgers under contract for 2 more seasons. It was a shocking pick for really everybody, but it's really looking like it's going to work out for them. And what was seen as one of the most wild, worst picks and criticized heavily at the time might not end up looking like a bad pick at all. In fact, it might look like one of the better, if not potentially one of the best picks in the entire draft that year. So let's look at a couple of advanced metrics here. He had 4,159 passing yards, which was 7th in the entire NFL this past season. He also had 4,851 air yards, which was good for 2nd in the entire NFL. He also finished 6th in the NFL with 23 total money throws. So this shows he was really attacking the field deep, which is one of the principles of the Shanahan scheme, and was really quite successful at it. He wasn't just throwing these little dump-offs and playing dink and dunk offense the entire way. And really, you don't need to bow down to the defense. You need to make the defense bow down to you, and that's what Jordan Love was doing this past season. His true passer rating of 95.4 was good for 13th in the entire NFL, and that's considering he had a really slow start during the first half of the season. His end-of-year finish was much higher than this number indicates. His QBR of 61.5 was also good for 10th in the entire NFL. And once again, this was really hurt by the first half of the season. His number once again would have been much higher if you took a look at the second half of this past season. His 128.2 EPA, or expected points added, was good for 6th in the entire NFL this past season. Then when we look at his fantasy points per snap and fantasy points per game totals, they are even more impressive. His 0.54 fantasy points per dropback was good for 8th in the entire NFL. And his 19.4 fantasy points per game was also good for 5th in the entire NFL. And as I've said with all these other stats, if you really just looked at what he did in the second half of the season, those numbers would have been much higher. They were really hurt by a very sluggish start to the season. Things really started to click for them, and if you're a Packers fan, there is a lot to look forward to. Looking at his measurables, once again, he's a little bit over 6'3", right around 220 pounds, but he has over 10-inch hands, which puts him in the 95th percentile among quarterbacks. This is something that's really important in December games, really cold games in general. You need to be able to have a good grip on the football to get some zip on your throws and really keep your accuracy going. And he possesses the hands necessary to play in this kind of really poor weather from year to year, so that's one really good thing for the Packers. He's also only 25.7 years old, and this was his first season starting, so there's definitely room for growth, as explained by the second half of this past season compared to the first half. The sky is the absolute limit. When we look at his metrics, he ran a 4.74 40-yard dash, which is in the 73rd percentile among quarterbacks, so he definitely has the requisite mobility to be a scrambling threat, and we did see that from time to time. More so in the sense of creative playmaking rather than explicit scrambling, but he can do both. He also has an 87th percentile burst score, which is his vertical and broad jump. This is really important when making explosive movements in the pocket to be able to avoid defenders, and he was quite good at that this past year. His agility, velocity score, and especially Wonderlic score weren't the best, but it really didn't affect his play, and Wonderlic score isn't something that teams per se care about as much anymore. For instance, the S2 test this past year, we all saw how much that affected CJ Stroud. He was just terrible because he failed that test, right? Anyways, so really an above-average athlete for the quarterback position. Looking at his stats, he didn't really do much in his first 2 seasons in the NFL. He was studying under Aaron Rodgers, and if this past season is any indication of how that process went, it was quite beneficial for him, because boy did he look good this past season. Looking at his stats, he had 4,159 passing yards with 7.2 yards per attempt, which is absolutely solid. Also, 247 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground, which gives him some insulation in terms of his fantasy value, which really goes to show that, and I'm not making this comparison directly, that he's kind of like a Patrick Mahomes style of quarterback, in that he has the improvisational ability to extend plays and find things outside the pocket, and is also a scrambling threat. He also had 32 passing touchdowns, which is quite impressive, giving him 36 total on the year. We'll see. The sky's the limit for him. There's potential for growth there. Not to mention, he was fifth in the NFL with 19.4 fantasy points per game, which, besides the fact that he's a real-life quarterback, means that it looks as though he's going to be quite a viable starting quarterback for you in redraft and dynasty leagues, regardless of whether it's 1 QB or superflex format. Looking at their offense, and at least in the sense of the total depth chart, it did receive an upgrade from this past season. It's really more so a collection of very solid role players than studs at their respective positions. So obviously we have Jordan Love at quarterback. They did sign Josh Jacobs to a 3-year deal that's really more of a 1 to 2 year deal. I suspect it'll play out as a 2-year deal. They did draft Marshawn Lloyd behind him as a 3rd-round pick. He should be able to learn quite a bit from Josh Jacobs. Hopefully he learns a couple things about holding onto the ball that Josh Jacobs could teach him. We'll see about that because he is very talented. Then you have Christian Watson. There's been reports that he's figured out his hamstring issues and had a little bit of surgery, I believe, to correct that. So when he plays, he's a very explosive vertical threat for them, and Jordan Love's arm is really complemented by his ability to win deep. Then they have Romeo Doubs. He's a situational X wide receiver. I think he's the worst of these kind of starting receivers they have, but he can definitely play X for them. He is a threat in the red zone, being 6'2". Then you have Jaden Reed in the slot, and he can play Z as well. He is an absolute stud. Check out some of my past videos, especially the breakout wide receivers video on him, for some really cool advanced stats. He is going to be a star. Then you have everybody's favorite breakout wide receiver, Dontavian Wicks. He has positional versatility. He can play the X, Y, or Z in this offense. He has some of the best separation metrics in the entire NFL. Seriously, look it up. Then they have Bo Melton. He actually was the first wide receiver this past season for the Packers to have 100 yards in a game. He's just a depth piece, however. Then at tight end, they have Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Musgrave is more of the seam stretcher, whereas Kraft is more of the possession tight end. So, like I said, an allotment of weapons that complement each other and allow Jordan Love to really be able to hit all the points of the field, and really makes it difficult for defenses to be able to focus on any one of these players. Jordan Love is currently 19th in the NFL in terms of annual salary at the quarterback position. This is obviously way too low, and players such as Derek Carr, Daniel Jones, Baker Mayfield, especially Geno Smith, definitely should not be being paid as much as Jordan Love, especially more than him. And obviously, as the article stated, $50 million per year is a baseline. So let's take a look at where he might be in annual salary in terms of among the top quarterbacks after he is able to sign an extension. Currently, Kyler Murray is under $50 million, and the first quarterback in this list above $50 million is Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. So their baseline is saying he's going to at least be the 7th highest paid quarterback in the league. I think he'll fall right around that Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff, $54-55 million per year annual figure. I suspect they're definitely going to try to make it as long-term of a contract as possible. I'd imagine it's a 6 to 7 year contract extension because they're going to want to get this going as soon as possible and hurry up and get this completed because quarterback salaries are ever increasing. I like Trevor Lawrence, for instance, but for him to be the 2nd highest paid quarterback, he just does not deserve that. And Jared Goff being the 3rd highest paid quarterback, he also just doesn't deserve to be quite that high. So Jordan Love is absolutely going to be right around this range, if not higher. I wouldn't be shocked if he's able to top Joe Burrow's $55 million per year contract and really reset the market. And if he's able to do that, we're going to see new quarterbacks each year reset the market over and over again, as we've been seeing the past couple of seasons, especially since Patrick Mahomes signed that massive extension that Now, anyways, doesn't look like that much money at all for a quarterback. Looking at his ADP in both Dynasty and Redraft, he's going off as the QB10 in both formats. In terms of Dynasty, I think that's a relatively good value, honestly. I mean, he was the QB5 in fantasy points per game, even after having a slow start in the first half of the season, and it was his first year starting. He finished as the QB6 overall. Really, he's being drafted a little bit lower than his ceiling already, which is a bit surprising considering, for instance, CJ Stroud is going at QB3, which in my opinion is well above his fantasy ceiling, at least on a consistent basis. So I think that's quite a good value. I am a bit surprised he's going behind the likes of Joe Burrow, especially with that recent injury. Usually recency bias really takes effect here, which, to be fair, is why CJ Stroud's going at QB3, but it hasn't hit Joe Burrow as much as I would expect. And I'm honestly a bit surprised that Jordan Love isn't being valued as a top 5 quarterback in terms of dynasty value. Not that he does or doesn't deserve to have that value, but, recency bias. Then when you look at his redraft, I mean, he was QB5 in fantasy points per game once again, finished as a QB6 this past season. What's happened? They signed Josh Jacobs and drafted Marshawn Lloyd, so they should have a bit better of a running game, which you could argue might lower his ceiling if they run a little bit more. But it also should allow them to score more points, so that also kind of negates that. Along with having a Shanahan-style coach and scheme in town, the sky is the absolute limit. I think he's going to finish above QB10. I'd probably guess he finishes around that 7 to 8 mark, but make no mistake, he absolutely could be a top 3 quarterback. He probably hasn't reached his ceiling, unless you believe after his first year he's already reached his ceiling, and I certainly don't. The situation's great. Their defense isn't going to be that great either, so they're going to have to be able to pass the ball a lot, and thus I think he's going to be better than QB10. So I think he's a value in both redraft and dynasty. But what do you think? Do you think that Jordan Love and the Packers are going to be able to come to a resolution in terms of a contract extension? If so, do you think it reaches the $50 million per year annual mark? Do you think it exceeds that? Do you think it's lower than that? Do you think he finds a new team? Also, do you think that Jordan Love is the answer in Green Bay? And as well as, do you think he's a good value at the QB10 in redraft and dynasty? Please let me know in the comment section below. With that being said, I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, your NFL breaking news source, and the dynasty and redraft implications behind said breaking news. Please remember that I am building a library of information with which you can use to dominate your redraft and dynasty leagues in 2024 and in the future. Please remember to like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you and have a good day.